Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to everybody that's registered for today's webinar on damp and mould in rented properties. I want to thank all the panelists who are going to take part today. So thank you to Tamsin and Leonard from DampSmart, who will do start today's presentation. And then we'll follow on with Rich Abbots from Klerky. And then we've got Sandy from the Tenant Deposit Scheme. We've had record number of people registered for today's webinar, so we are expecting a lot of questions. So if you do have any questions, on the right-hand side, there's a questions tab. So just pop your questions in there and we'll get to them at the time if it's relevant or at the very end of the webinar. So we'll try and get to all of your questions if we do have time. There's a lot of content to get through today, so we'll kick off very shortly. As mentioned, this is a live webinar, so there might be some technical issues, so do bear with us if internet goes down or microphones break or anything like that. So do bear with us with that. And also, we've also got some guides that we'll share as well after the webinar in the next few days. So we've got a damp and mould checklist guide and a sample report. So in the coming days following the webinar, we'll share that guide with you, as well as a recording of today's webinar. So again, thanks for everyone's registration, and I'll hand over to Leonard and Tamsin from DampSmart, who will kick off today's presentation.
Thanks, Mitch. So we won't do introductions of where we're from and what we've been doing, but I will say at the beginning of this session, what we hope you're going to learn from it. What we hope you're going to learn is something about all the experience that we've had using data and all our analysis of thousands of properties, trying to help people to understand what is actually causing damp and mould in a property. And you're probably going to pick up, hopefully, about 4 key things from this event from us, which will be about temperature, moisture, ventilation, and walls. Not the ice cream, but the fabric of your building, because those things in combination, those are going to be the things that we'll be talking about. That once you understand how they all work together, you'll get a better understanding of what's actually causing damp and mould. And as the captions say there in front of us, most mould problems aren't really caused by just one thing. And we will have a poll a little later just to find out what people's view of what causes damp and mould, but typically it's not just one thing. And when you look at the data, it's often caused by multiple things, lots of small things happening over time. And time is the really key factor to damp and mould. If you go next slide.
Oh, sorry. You said there'd be technical problems, Mitch.
Oh, no.
I can't even switch the slide.
We've got the right slide. So
that's good.
So just to set the scene, we've created our technology, so it's all about data, understanding the building's physics, and understanding what it is about the building, what's it about the fabric, and what is it about the outside that actually causes these problems. And I think one of the big problems that you often see is people don't really understand. You can see the mould, but you don't know how it started and how far it's going to go. Is it going to be quite severe? And that puts people in a bit of an odd and sometimes frustrating situation where you've got landlords and the tenants and anybody, contractors, lawyers, everybody not quite sure what the problem is, and everybody come up with their own reasons. But it does matter. It does matter that you need to understand what the cause of the problem is, because now we have it's about law and it's about well-being. Law, and we'll talk a bit more about it around Awaab's law, decent homes, HHSRS 2, and I think Richard, you'll be talking about HHSRS 2 soon.
Yeah. And
even with Awaab's law, it isn't just about damp and mould as it is right now, but as I think Tamsin, you're going to say about in October, there's going to be some the legislation is also going to include overheating as well. So it's about not just about damp and mould, it's also about well-being. And Tamsin, can you just say a little bit about what's happening in October?
Yeah. So obviously at the moment, Awaab's is only kind of affecting social housing providers, but it's something I think all private rented sector landlords and agents are very much aware of, just trying to get ahead of the game. But yeah, we had an example from, this is a housing association in the southwest. They had a family reporting severe overheating in a new build property. So the child in the home was repeatedly being admitted to hospital with heat rash, and this has been going on for nearly 2 years. So on paper, the home looked perfect, really good EPC rating. So the assumption was that the property itself couldn't be the issue. We ran our environmental survey in the property, and what the data actually showed was really clearly it was extreme solar gain, and the building was trapping heat and the internal temperatures were regularly exceeding safe comfort levels. But once the housing provider had this evidence, they were able to act really quickly and install the appropriate cooling measures. I think it was an air conditioning unit in this case. Ultimately, the child stopped being admitted to hospital, and the complaint had gone from being nearly 2 years to being resolved in just a matter of a few weeks. And like the takeaway for us, I think, isn't the technology, it's when you measure what's actually happening inside a home, you move from debate to evidence.
Yeah, and that's a really important point around understanding what the root cause is, so so that the actions and the remedies don't get missed, and we don't spend lots of time and money doing the wrong things. Just before we go to the next slide, can we put up a poll, Mitch? And this is one of those questions. It's a poll because we all have our own belief about what damp and mould, or how damp and mould is caused, and what's the root cause of it. We just want to send or get people's sense of what they think it is. So if you can run the poll. I'll make you on mute. Is Mitch on mute?
Yeah, Mitch, you're still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just saying, I can see all the votes coming through now. So interesting split. So we've had over 180 votes now. Yeah, so I'll give it 15 more seconds, then it's been run for a minute.
Okay.
And then I can share the results very quickly now if you prefer, or at the end, it's up to you. So
okay, let's go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so I'll end the poll and then we'll share the results later on.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
Wait 1 second.
So you can tell it's the first time I've done this sort of thing, but with polls and everything, but it's very useful. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so go to the next one. That's it. The reason why we've done the poll is because over the years, me personally, I've been to a lot of properties, looked at what the mould and damp situation is there. I know that Tamsin has. I know we all have on this call. Many of you, your job is to go in there and do the assessment. But it still surprises me, even now, that we're still not clear. If you get 2 or 3 people in the room and you say to them, well, what do you think is causing that? We'll have different answers. And that really slows down our ability to then find the root cause and then get to what the action should be. Condensation, yeah, typically you get the condensation in maybe the corners of a property where the walls are exposed to the outside, where it's just colder, behind furniture, where there's lack of ventilation. Obviously, we're near windows where it's cold on the surface, but you're not quite sure whether it's simply because, is it the insulation quality of that material, or is it actually there's lots of moisture in the air that's condensing, or condensing onto that cold surface. And then you have the problem around understanding penetrating and rising damp. Now I'm going to put my hand up right away now. I'm not a building surveyor, and yes, I know about boroscopes and protometers and so on, but there are probably some people on this call who are far more qualified than I to talk about that. But there's still confusion or debate, even amongst surveyors that we've been working with. When is it penetrating? Is it internal? Rising damp is even with rising damp, we do find there is a bit of a debate around, is it rising damp or not? Now, the one question there is there a simple rule to this? Is there a simple rule that you can say, you can walk into a property and say, this is what the problem is? I'll give you an example of why it's not that simple, because the answer really is no, there isn't a simple rule. We had a property where it was right on a riverbank, really nice big converted property, and there's mold and damp in cupboards, on clothes, and the landlord, they thought that the tenant just simply wasn't ventilating the property at all. When we went in there and then we did the survey, we did all the sensors and the analysis, what we discovered is that the tenant was ventilating the property, but because they're quite near a very sort of humid environment, they had trees and there was the river, no matter what they were doing, the moisture levels outside weren't really helping with the drying effect inside. So they were opening windows, and we could see that in the data, but they weren't getting the benefit of drier air outside because it wasn't drier air. Suddenly the conversation turned from, all right, you're not doing the best you can possibly do. It's turned to, okay, so how are we gonna extract that moisture from that property? And that's a completely different conversation than saying it's the way that person was living. And I know, Tamsin, you've got a similar one where I think it was a cottage. They thought it was the insulation was the problem.
Yeah. So it's a gentleman living in an old kind of station house cottage, you know, big stone, thick walls, and he had a reoccurring mold in the bedroom. Tried everything, was opening the windows, ventilating properly, but it just kept coming back. So he thought it was to do with insulation. He thought that there was an issue with the wall, but instead of him guessing, he measured the environmental conditions using our technology across the whole house. And what the data showed was that the heating patterns were extremely erratic. So the property would get warm, then drop very cold, then warm again, then drop cold again. So basically he was just blasting the heating on for a couple of hours in the morning and a couple of hours in the evening. But because it was an old stone cottage, obviously those walls were getting too cold. And when the moisture condensed on colder surfaces, it's exactly what mold needs to grow. But the solution wasn't major building work in this scenario. It was a simple solution of maintaining a steady background temperature of around 18 degrees. And once that heating pattern had stabilized, the mold stopped returning. So again, like the lesson in this one is when you measure what's happening inside a home, the solution is often a lot simpler than what you think. You know, he was originally thinking, oh, I'm going to have to get, you know, cavity wall insulation. I'm going to need this, that, and the other. It wasn't. It was a matter of actually just turning that dial on. And this chap as well was a heating engineer, wasn't he, Leonard? So it was kind of one of the not even the expert knew that actually it was his heating habits that was causing the issue. But it is, again, it's really simple solutions that, you know, get to the first time, really.
I think that's the key to this is often we all do it. We often see a situation and we think, yeah, I've seen this before. It must be that's the cause. When you measure it, often you do get a different root cause. And when you do get that clear understanding of what the root cause is, it becomes a lot easier to have that conversation with the tenant and the landlord about what can be done and what's affordable. If we go to the next slide.
Just a very quick one, Leonard. I've just had a question come through saying, why would there be condensation behind furniture? As that was one of the points.
Yeah. So the wall was cold in itself, and the moisture was getting onto that wall, and then there wasn't any ventilation to even dry it out. So yeah, it was a combination of the wall being cold, condensation, and then no ventilation. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Is that okay? Yeah. Just to let you know, there were some pictures that we were going to show in these slides, which were going to be a little bit more graphic of some horrible black mold and that. But I think I don't think we want to see that at lunchtime. But going back to that question, we often do see a lot of that, particularly in bay windows, particularly where there's furniture up against those bay windows. it's just a cold surface. Moisture gets attracted to it. There's not much ventilation, but we can pick that all up. Just there's a, I wouldn't say there's circular flow, but there is a that question about what's actually causing mold, and I think that last question was a good illustration of that. Is it moisture? Is it the cold surface? Is it people? Is it you and I doing stuff, cooking, bathing? Is it low heating? Is it the erratic heating that Tamsin talked about? The one thing about mold growth that we've seen over and over again is time. We had a recent case where working with an enforcement team, and Tamsin will talk about it a bit later, a council enforcement team. We've been working with them to see how they can change the way that they apply enforcement and instead work with the landlord to maybe make some changes, and the tenant as well. And we had a particular case where they washed down the walls. It had quite a bit of mold on it. They washed down the walls and we measured it for about 2 weeks. And by the 8th day, you could see mold coming back again. And it's that thing about someone can wash their walls down, or they could be completely pristine. You go in there, they look great, but actually time is the thing that creates allows these things to happen. I think Tamsin mentioned it before, but EPC is not a good indicator of you having a great house, unfortunately. I wish it was, but it's not. Time and time again, we do see people who've either renting out or renting a property, and it was built in, a few years ago, and there's still issues with it. Often we do see that, 65% humidity may sound high. In some properties, it's okay. It's not great, but it can withstand it because you've got ventilation, or the walls can withstand that. But it is understanding all the elements of, don't just rely on the EPC. You do need to understand, number one, can people actually afford to heat their properties? Keeping it at 21 degrees in winter when outside is at 5 degrees and you're running a storage heating, electric storage heating, a lot of people can't do that. And we still see, even now, even today, we've got properties that are running at 13 degrees centigrade. But what we typically see is people, if they can't afford the heating, they switch it down. It then gets to, say, 15, 16 degrees. If it's at that 15, 16 degrees internally, then the walls are going to be around about 12 degrees. You keep living your daily life, cooking, bathing, so on. Moisture builds up. You may not want to open your windows because actually it's cold enough and you don't want to lose the heat. So again, it gets trapped in, and then you can start to see that actually moisture condenses, mold starts appearing, and then that's when cost starts happening. So it is that thing about understanding. It's not just one thing. Often, because we're working with social housing, often it is about the cost of heating. People just can't afford it. And then in those cases, it's how do you reduce that risk by either saying, actually, here's some funds to keep the heating on, or doing something else, maybe increasing the ventilation. Can we go back to, sorry, let's go to the next slide.
Sure.
So the key thing for us that we've learned over the many years now is, what should you be looking for? We've worked with surveyors who really don't want to destroy walls. They don't really, they've got a suspicion that it's maybe this is the insulation, but to bore holes into walls, it's destructive and it's not very useful. We've worked with landlords who believe it may be the windows not just being opened at all, but then we discover that actually the windows are inaccessible, that you just can't reach them. Sometimes the thermostat settings are just really difficult to set for some people. We still get those little manual controls. They're not actually thermostats, I forgot what they're called now, but they're just dials that you set to, and they don't actually have a digital setting. So when it comes to look, what signs are you looking for? There's quite a lot that you can just see by sight, and Richard is going to talk a bit more about them. But the corners of rooms, often we do see where there's a lot of maybe furniture, clothing in there. There's not going to be that much ventilation around it. And if it's the corner where it's 2 external walls, that wall is likely to be quite cold as well. Behind the beds, again, many people don't really move their beds. But again, if that bed is up against an external wall, typically we do start to see, it's not just because the bed is against that wall. There are other factors as well, but take a look. Often you'll see some signs behind that. Again, cupboards on external walls, wardrobes, food cupboards, they don't get any heat, and take a look in there. So those are the sort of visual checks. There's some things you can ask, and we've worked with some charities where we've deliberately put in just a couple of questions into a questionnaire. Not even a questionnaire, just something that you just ask when you go and visit. The first question is about, are they able to keep the heating on at 20 degrees? And if it's no concern for them, or is it going to be a high cost for them? Or if we do get responses where the people say, I don't even try and get it to that because the heating doesn't even get to that. If that's the case, there's something wrong with the house. If they're losing heat that badly, then there's something wrong with the house. And we do see properties like coach houses, where almost like on stilts, I suppose, where you've got garages underneath them, and they have 3 external walls, and the heat just goes through the floors and the walls. It's just really hard to heat the places. The second one is ventilation, and a question around how long do you keep the fan on for? And it's surprising what people say, and surprises us still what ventilation systems are in bathrooms, and in some places there's no ventilation, there's no fan at all. We've all probably seen it ourselves or experienced it ourselves, but even though there's a fan in the bathroom, in the summer or in lighter months, if you're not actually putting the light on, the fan doesn't go on. So the fan's there, but it doesn't go on. Or if in the winter months you do put it on, the override may not be working, or people actually just switch it off. But just those 2 questions around affordability of heat, but also the experience of ventilation, is really quite a powerful set of questions to ask. So if you go to the next slide. So here, we'll talk a bit about our technology and what it's all about, and why it's different to most other technology you'll see. Yes, our technology is all about, I'll show you a small sensor there. We do use sensor technology like a lot of people do. But what we do is we measure inside the fabric of the building and outside. And any of you who are in building physics, construction, surveyors, you'll know what sort of equation that gives you. I'm not going to say it, but because I'll get a whole bunch of people saying, you're getting too technical and get too geeky. So I'm not going to say what that equation is, but essentially you need to understand what's going on inside the fabric and outside to then understand what's actually part of the cause of what's going on. And we measure that, and we apply all those building science algorithms to come up with actually what's going on and what's at fault. But we do it in every single room. And it's important that we do it in every room, even in basements and void areas as well, because you can then get a sense of how that building is responding to the outside, but also to how we work in those buildings as well. And that's really important, because at the end of the day, what we want to do, and I know Richard and your team want to do, and I know Sandy, you want to see as well. You want to understand the root cause, and you want to understand what the action needs to be to make it better before it gets to a point where there's disputes and a whole bunch of money is being wasted. And that's why we do all those elements. The evidence piece, I think it's funny. We're working with 2 councils at the moment. They're private rented sector enforcement teams, helping them transition from pure enforcement to actually, I want to help the landlord and the tenant to understand what's going on, and therefore everybody's happier. I know, Tamsin, you've got an example of one of them that we're working with in London.
Yeah. So, like Len said, we've been working with a number of local authorities, and as you can imagine, a lot of enforcement teams are dealing with vast numbers of damp and mould complaints, especially since Awaab's law has come into effect. As many of you will know, enforcement cases can take months because there's often disagreements between the tenant and the landlord about what's actually happening in the property. But the councils that we've been working with started to use environmental building data to support their investigations. So we always call it like we've turned the enforcement team into the smartest enforcement team in London, because they understand all of this really complex building physics, but we've made it so it's digestible for them. So by measuring what's happening inside the home over time, they're able to really show clearly whether it's ventilation, heating, moisture levels, or if it is a building defect. And what they've told us was that having the evidence has actually helped them explain the situations much more clearly to both the landlord and tenant, which is a significant, it's significantly sped up their resolution process. And it's now something that they very confidently have said that they've embedded into their enforcement process, because it helps everyone focus on fixing the problem correctly the first time. So like from landlords and enforcement teams or an agent's perspective, one of the biggest benefits of having evidence is that it protects everyone involved. Instead of relying on opinions, you have a clear record of what's actually going on in the home. So it makes you the smartest person when you've got hold of all of that intelligence. But we've kind of put it into a way that makes it so easy to digest.
Yeah,
actually.
Absolutely. And I think that's the cause. I think that's one of the things about data. And yeah, I'm guilty, and I know Tamsin keeps telling me off.
You got to get your geek on.
Yeah, get geek on. And being geeky about data is great. So I'm not going to stop anybody from doing that. But I think where we want people to, we want the data to help people is that it gives them what the root cause is, but also some actions. And to do that, it does need a combination of people on the ground taking a look, but also being armed with data that they can then refer to as well to then make a decision about what to do next. And I think particularly now where there is, let's face it, a shortage of housing, everybody wants to live in a really great place, and we want to find a way of getting that data so you can make the right fix and that you can live in a great place. If we go to the next one. So a little bit about going on around the technology and what it actually is. So I've already talked about the sensor technology. It's been designed so that it's super simple for anybody to install, and we've deliberately done it that way. So so it can be posted to you. You can put it in yourself. You just plug the hub in. It's got a small SIM card in it, and off you go. And that's the hard part over. Just making sure that there's no need to hook up to Wi-Fi or know anything about, well, you don't need to know anything really about the building itself. What we need to do is put the sensors in, and we do all the physics after that. Yes, we do real-time monitoring, and it's quite interesting. We haven't got a poll on it, but people are fascinated by what's going on in their property. We've been working with some homeowners, going beyond private rented landlords and social housing, but people love to know how cold it is in their house. They love to know that they're doing the right thing as well, when the moisture levels are down. And I know Tamsin, with your daughter, I think she's.
Oh yeah, my daughter is now heavily obsessed not only with a UV index but with relative humidity in our property. And for a 15-year-old that has no interest in mathematics, I find it quite funny that she will come in and be like, "Mum, the relative humidity is 65%." And I'm like, "Okay, darling, what do we need to do?" She's like, "Get some heat in that room." So yeah, that's been quite an interesting one.
Yeah. So I think we covered quite a few things here, and I know a lot of what we've been trying to get across is that damp and mould isn't just one thing, and it isn't instantaneous. You do need to consider a number of things, but the beauty about understanding those things and then getting to the root cause is that we do have a direct impact on well-being, but also on the property and the return that you get from the property, that you can keep the rent going. And the well-being one is kind of sometimes it's forgotten about. But we had a recent one with a private landlord where their tenant was saying all they wanted to do was be proud of their own home, and that they could then invite people back to their home, because there was damp there was mold on one of the external walls, and it became clear that particular wall wasn't very well insulated. The landlord made the improvements, and then suddenly the tenant is happy. It's their safe place. It's their place that they are able to invite people back to, and they're happy. And that sometimes we forget that, but people can benefit. Well, both sides can benefit, both the landlord and the tenant. If I go to the next slide. In fact, actually, if we go to the last slide, because I think the time is not on our side a bit. So what next? So we're going to be doing a few things with our friends, TDS and Klerky and Inventory Hive. We're going to be starting some DampSmart surgeries. I know that every day I get a call from a landlord saying, "I've got this problem, what do I do?" We want to formalise that a little bit, but offer it out as a small groups or even one-to-ones, where we can have those surgeries with people and start to look at what their problem is and see how we can help. Be DampSmart, be the smartest person in the room. It's all about, and I think Tamsin spoke about it as well, is once you understand that combination of what's going on with the fabric of the building, the ventilation, the heating, the moisture, then you start to feel a little bit more empowered to make better decisions. And we want to, with the help of TDS and with the help of Klerky, is start to have that bank of knowledge and data that you can all refer to. And linked to that will be, we will be issuing a ready record, like a calculator, a simple calculator that you can then put in temperature and humidity, understand what's going on outside, and it'll tell you what the moisture content is inside and what you can do, what ventilation is needed to actually take that moisture out. That'll be coming out soon, but it's all about helping people be a little bit smarter in what they and how they diagnose, but also how they then fix.
Thank you very much, Leonard. And Tamsin, obviously. So, okay, so obviously, what we've looked at there is real-world indicators of damp and mould, the underlying causes and the importance of monitoring. So my section now is going to focus on a few simple but important questions. So, how do property managers, organisations actually catch these issues early, create evidence defensible reports that are converted into actionable maintenance issues as well? So in summary, we'll go through how to address issues before they escalate into compliance issues or worst case tenant harm. So obviously, as you've alluded to as well, Leonard, we've got a diverse mix on the session today. So from letting agents through to independent inventory clerks and housing associations. So I'd like to discuss how inspections and tech are relevant to all parties in that respect. So I'd like to start by giving some consideration to the table on this slide, which is a snippet taken from the free guide that we'll be sending out next week. So visual checks are typically carried out during routine property inspections, or they're sometimes referred to as interim visits, midterm visits, or, you know, but that's often where these issues are initially picked up, or of course the tenant raising them directly. So this is often the first port of call, so it's vital to consider the visual checks and gathering an audit trail a crucial starting point. And that's where the visual evidencing side of the technology comes in, alongside the monitoring bits that Tamsin and Leonard have just been talking about. So, so the first question is, so why does early detection matter? So, well, I suppose we all know that property issues don't start as emergencies. They start as small, a patch of condensation, an unusual smell, a cold corner, or a missed ventilation check. But these small early symptoms become serious problems when nobody spots them, nobody documents them, nobody acts on them, or nobody follows through. So the buzzword for this is known as permissive waste. And this is exactly why professional inspections, supported by the right technology, drive better outcomes. They turn what used to be guesswork or inconsistent record keeping into clean visibility, structured evidence, and timely intervention. But of course, the tech can help coordinate and support the process, but there has to be a commitment to carrying out regular interim visits to catch these permissive waste issues that tenants or residents might not always raise themselves. So let's look at what defensible evidence means, and we'll take Awaab's law as an example. So defensible evidence means inspection findings that withstand regulatory, legal, or environmental health scrutiny. So under Awaab's law, that requires clear, objective, unambiguous reporting. So in other words, no reference to sort of vague or informal notes that no longer stand up to enforcement. Adequate evidence of hazards includes what was seen, where, and how serious it is. So weak, inconsistent, or incomplete evidence is well, essentially difficult to defend. So proof of accountability and timely action, especially for damp and mould, which are treated as health critical hazards. So a structured audit trail that shows the inspector followed a consistent process aligned with Awaab's law inspections. So in a nutshell, defensible evidence is clear, consistent, well-structured documentation that demonstrates you identified hazards properly and acted in line with the timelines and accountability standards. So on this next slide, I'm going to, hold on. Yeah, sorry, I'm skipping around now. Here we go. So on this one, what I'd like to do is explain how the structure of a modern technology-driven inspection report makes it robust and consistent, especially when dealing with issues like damp and mould. So you'll see that there are 6 objectives listed on here. So the first one being structured questions that remove ambiguity. So first, the report uses tightly defined structured questions. So rather than leaving things open to interpretation, the inspector answers clear yes or no prompts on areas such as damp and mould linked to the property, so the fabric of the building that Leonard mentioned a moment ago, damp and mould linked to the tenancy as well, heating and ventilation, extractor vans, trickle vents, signs of leaks or structural problems, because these questions, if they're standardized, every inspector collects the information in the same way, and that consistently is what removes subjectivity and strengthens defensibility. So the second point being that questions capture legally relevant evidence. So second, that the report isn't just gathering generic observations, it prompts the inspector for I can't even say it, specific types of evidence required under the legislation. So for example, it will ask, is there visible damp, mould, mildew or condensation on the ceilings or the walls? Whether the heating and ventilation are adequate, which was something that was mentioned earlier on by you, Leonard, in terms of the monitoring of the temperature. And of course, also linked to the tenancy, whether vulnerable residents live in the property. Now, of course, those are huge implications on the health and well-being of people living in those properties. So in a nutshell, they go straight to the heart of a risk assessment. So is there a hazard? How severe is it? is the resident vulnerable, and does the landlord's heating and ventilation provision meet the expectations? Because the technology forces these questions to be answered, the report naturally aligns with what investigators, local authorities are looking for. So technology combines tick box evidence with descriptive notes. Yes, simple yes and no questions are useful. However, there are certain scenarios where you need to go one step further. So that requires like identification of the location, for example, of where the mold is. So it's factual and not based on any assumptions. For example, they may describe mold is located, what it looks like and how far it's spread. And alongside those descriptions, the system ensures photos are captured, every image is time-stamped, and each photo links directly to the observation. This turns the report into a clear evidence narrative rather than vague descriptions. Now, all of this is important when using technology because it allows you to have that time-stamped evidence report in a consistent way. So number 4, it separates property-related and tenant-related factors, which is something that we've noted earlier on. So by keeping these categories distinct, the report is designed, of course, to avoid inappropriate tenant blame and clearly gathers visual evidence to start understanding if the issue is structural behaviour or a mix of both. Again, that's the kind of thing that works alongside the ongoing monitoring that's being picked up by Leonard and Tamsin just now. So the 5th point being built-in risk escalation. So it helps flag urgent situations. And this is really important. So it's about identifying whether the damp is minor or severe, whether there's multiple rooms affected, whether decorative surfaces are damaged, whether vulnerable residents are living in the property as well. So in essence, using technology can help ensure that nothing critical is missed. And then the final point on this being a complete digital audit trail. So as I said a moment ago, having consistent questions, photos with timestamps, everything gets stitched together in a secure audit trail, and this creates a defensible record showing what was seen, when it was seen, how it was assessed, and exactly what evidence supports that assessment. So then moving on to the next one. So in terms of technology as well, obviously I'd probably be a little bit remiss to not make reference to how AI is now being used to help generate descriptions. Now, Klerky as a marketplace that was launched April last year is designed so that vetted, insured, qualified property inspectors can be found. But in addition to that, our sister company, Inventory Hive, have launched AI photo descriptions in beta with our existing users. And what that essentially means is you can have a photo of an issue and the AI will describe in a very factual way what is in that photo. So break it down to condition, cleanliness, so the item itself, and then condition and cleanliness, which is really important. And that's where bringing technology in can help with that objective evidence, which I think is important. But then not only that, from a technology perspective, it's about understanding, yes, you've identified there's a damp and mold issue in the property. You've got the evidence audit trail report, there's a problem. Perhaps your next step is to introduce something like DampSmart technology. But in addition to that, how can you then instigate the next step? In other words, how can you trigger maintenance? And again, that's where technology can come in and allow you to send maintenance issues through to platforms like FixFlow, or generate a spreadsheet that summarizes those maintenance issues. So when you combine professional inspectors and modern technology, you can create that closed loop. So the 5 points around that would be: identify issues earlier, document them accurately, communicate them with the right people, trigger the maintenance or follow-up workflow, and then ultimately that gives you the evidence, everything you need to help protect tenants and landlords, and that closes the gap between knowing a problem exists and being able to fast track it and get it fixed. And of course, as Leonard and Tamsin alluded to as well, if you've got that data, it could be the difference between going down the route of a really expensive remedial job versus something as simple as regulating the temperature of the property. And moving on to the next one, so that the power of professional inspectors. With the housing health and safety rating system that's currently in play, that was released originally in April 2026. That is now being evolved into a HHSRS2 framework. And the talk is that it's going to be 29 hazards as it currently is, condensed down into 21 hazards with a more simple traffic light system. And in addition to that, of course, Awaab's law is going to be brought into the private rented sector, whereas at the moment it is, very specific to housing associations, but that is set to change. And then further down the line, we've got decent home standard. And so I suppose the message here is compliance within a property is naturally going to rise, and that will of course put pressure on landlords, it will put pressure on letting agents, property managers, and so obviously what we try to achieve with Klerky is to introduce that network where you can get that extra support, so vetted, insured, qualified inspectors that produce that structured, consistent reporting, and we've managed to get to a point where we've got some dead spots, but generally speaking we've got good national coverage now with Klerky. So yeah, moving on to my final slide before I hand over to you, Sandy. In summary, inspectors provide accuracy. Professional inspections ensure nothing is missed. Technology ensures nothing is delayed, and together they ensure nothing escalates. That's how organisations create safer homes, reduce disputes, and meet modern compliance expectations. Yeah, that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Sandy now and tell me where you want the slides, Sandy. Do you want me to start with the principles one?
Yes, please. Yep, that's great. Thank you very much. Just from time constraints. Thank you very much. So just by way of a very brief introduction, obviously TDS is a tenancy deposit protection provider, enabling you to protect your deposits, and we offer a free alternative dispute resolution service at the end of the tenancy in the event that the parties are unable to reach agreement as to the distribution of the deposit. The hope is always that parties work together both during the tenancy and at the end of the tenancy to resolve disputes amicably, and adjudication is a last resort. Typically with damp and mould, the sorts of claims that we would see relate to cleaning, damage, and redecoration. I thought it'd be best to start with just the principles of adjudication. So the starting point is the deposit belongs to the tenant, it is their money. And if there is no evidence to support a deduction, then the deposit will be automatically returned to the tenant. So it is a documentary evidence-based process. It's not possible to rely upon a statement alone. And the burden of proof is with the party wishing to make a claim against the deposit in the first instance. So that would be the agent and the landlord. The decisions that the adjudicator makes are based on the balance of probabilities, so it is not beyond all reasonable doubt. The adjudicator will prefer some parties' evidence over the others. And obviously, it's essential that any awards must be fair, proportionate, and justified, and the principles of fair wear and tear and betterment will always come into play in relation to any decision that they're making. Thanks, Rich.
No problem. Do you want me to go on to this one? Yeah, no problem.
So what is the adjudicator going to do? How will they assess a claim that's made? So specifically here in relation to damp, first and foremost, the adjudicator will always identify the parties' contractual obligations under the tenancy agreement. Who is responsible for what? What must a tenant not do and do? And one of those key things that a tenant should do is report any issues that they see that arise during the tenancy as quickly as possible. The adjudicator is trying to identify whether damp is a structural maintenance, a structural issue, maintenance related issue, or lifestyle. And as Leonard said, it's not usually caused by one thing. So I think it's really key that you should jump to the conclusion that just because there's mould or damp in a property, that it is going to automatically be the tenant's responsibility. So they will review the check-in report, and in the case of damp and mould cases, mid-term interim inspections can be useful, but ultimately they are looking at the start condition of the property and the end condition. So they will be reviewing the check-in and check-out reports for evidence of whether there was mould or damp existing at the start of the tenancy, or how that has progressed at the end of the tenancy. And they will also be looking for those timelines of tenant reporting and landlord's response. And then they will consider expert or specialist reports to determine the root cause and assess whether either party contributed to or failed to prevent escalation. And on that basis, they will determine a likely award based on the evidence submitted. Next slide, Rich, thanks.
Sure.
So on the basis that that is what the adjudicator is going to be doing, there are obviously key documentation that you will need to have in place. And we always say prepare for a dispute at the start of the tenancy as opposed to at the end. So you will need a really robust signed tenancy agreement with a good deposit use clause in it. And it really sets out the rules of the game, what the tenant must do, what the landlord must do. The starting point is obviously a benchmark of the condition and cleanliness of the property when the tenancy starts. So a comprehensive signed inventory, preferably with embedded photographs, would be ideal. Again, that's for the start of the tenancy, but don't forget mid-tenancy. Do keep a written record and audit trail of any agreements during the tenancy. Perhaps something can be redecorated, perhaps some furniture is removed from the property. But specifically, this is where if there is an issue that has arisen, which a tenant has actually reported to you in line with the terms of the tenancy agreement, then keep a record of how quickly a landlord responds to that issue, what was the problem, how it was dealt with, and what was the final outcome. Moving to the end of the tenancy, you need again a comprehensive checkout report to show the condition of the property at the end of the tenancy and the standard of cleanliness, so that will enable the adjudicator to make a comparison from the start to the end. And receipts and invoices are really, really useful. So if anything has been happened during the tenancy, or you have conducted work, or there has been some redecoration because of damp or mould, then keep invoices and receipts so that you could evidence what has occurred during the tenancy. Next slide, Rich.
There we go.
So as I mentioned, no party can rely upon a statement alone. So it's really key to have specialist evidence to support claims, particularly in relation of damp and mould. So the contractor must be suitably qualified and experienced. The report should be suitably independent. As I mentioned, if repairs or improvements are recommended, then this often suggests that it is not just one cause, one thing that's causing the damp and the mould, and it might be that the tenant is not responsible for any remedial works. And it should include evidence-based findings and not just mere opinion. And hopefully it should provide a clear conclusion that allows the adjudicator to determine where the responsibility lies in respect of those claims for damage and redecoration. Next slide.
No problem.
So we've got a couple of case studies if we've got a bit of time to get through them. So in one case, the landlord was claiming to the cost to redecorate a bathroom at the end of the tenancy where the walls and ceiling were covered in mould. Tenancy agreement was provided, a check-in report and a check-out report, and an invoice for redecoration. In this particular instance, though, the tenant actually disputed the claim, stating that they had reported many months before and previously during the tenancy that the extractor fan in the bathroom had stopped working. And there was no evidence of any one coming round to actually fix that extractor fan. And so if we move on to the next slide, Rich, thank you, we'll be able to see what the adjudicator's decision was. So the adjudicator was satisfied that the tenant had a responsibility to look after the property and return it to the condition it was at the start of the tenancy, and to report any issues, which clearly the tenant did. The check-in report showed no signs of mould at the start, and the check-out report supported the fact that there was a deterioration in the bathroom. But the tenant did provide evidence of many times reporting during the tenancy, and there was no evidence to show that anything was done about that. And given that the fact that the landlord was placed on notice of the need to repair the extractor fan, and with no remedial works carried out, it was unreasonable for the adjudicator to consider any award, because the tenant had complied with their obligation to notify of any issues. Next slide, please, Rich. So again, anti-mould treatment, painting of walls and replacement net curtains were actually being claimed from the deposit. Again, we had a copy of the tenancy agreement, check-in report and check-out report, and there was also some email correspondence. The tenant disputed the claim, stating that there was ongoing mould from the outset of the tenancy, and that they had followed all guidance on ventilation and condensation, and reported issues to include a window that failed to open during the tenancy. So again, if we go on to the next slide, Rich.
Sure.
So again, we've got the tenancy agreement. The check-in report noted pre-existing staining and mould. So I think this is where it ties into the check-in, you know, and exactly the extent of detail that you need to go to, looking behind cupboards, etc. You know, sure giveaways are the sealant in showers, perhaps a shower curtain around the windows. And in this particular case, there was a clear problem actually with damp and mould in the property before the tenancy, when the tenants moved in, and there was an issue with the window that didn't open. And there was also email evidence contained within the bundle that was provided that was actually indicating that it was very common in this particular style of house that weren't originally designed to be fitted with double glazing, that there was an issue. And so without a specialist third-party report confirming the cause, and given the contents of the email and the fact that it had been reported that a window wasn't open, then again, it wasn't sufficient for tenant liability to be determined, or whether in this case it was opposed to an inherent structural cause.
Okay, super.
Next slide. Finished,
yeah.
Yes. Abdi finished there. Yeah, I think there's only one more anyway.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of time. I mean, Mitch, if you want to go through some of the questions, I mean, what we could do is, even if we overrun by 5 minutes, I know we're going to be sharing a recording of this with everybody anyway. Yeah. If that's all right with everybody else, if we stay until say 5 past, hopefully that's not too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll run through some of the questions now then. We've had quite a few, so I'll try and get through them. So one of them is, environmental health officers in our area state you cannot tell tenants how they should live, even when you know that you have never had a problem with condensation with other tenants in the previous 5 years. Just to follow up on that, they said, we manage properties in mid Wales. One of the biggest reasons I've seen mould in 30 plus years is tenants opening all the windows before going to work when there is damp, muggy weather, then turning on the central heating and closing the windows when they get home. This causes a dew point on the cold walls. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think
go for it then, Tom.
Yeah, I think you've just illustrated a situation where you need to get the root cause, and not just the root cause, but also find the language to be able to have a conversation with the tenant and the landlord, and maybe the contractors, that everybody understands, and you can adjust your behaviour or responses. We see this all the time. I guess if it's a comment, or is there a question in there, or is it?
I think it was just a general comment.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's.
I'd say we'd agree with what you're saying. Whoever's asked that question, you know, we do see it a lot, and it is, yes, I can't remember the name of the politician that said you're not allowed to blame lifestyle. but lifestyle does play a part in it. As Sandy had said, it's numerous things that happens. We are human beings. We live and we breathe and we expel moisture. The more human beings you have in a property, the more moisture there is in that property, the more moisture needs to come out of that property. There's been a TikTok trend as well, we've posted about it recently, called house burping, which is a German phrase called Lufen. And like we're saying, yeah, you can open all the windows, but if you're in mid Wales or you're living by a river, that doesn't always work. So it's getting that evidence to say, so you can confidently say that this
so
is.
we can help on that. I think Richard, you're going to add to that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I suppose, I think the main concern by the sound of the comment stroke question was whether or not they can say it's down to tenant lifestyle. But I think if you've got the monitoring evidence, it becomes more objective, doesn't it, rather than subjective. It's a data-driven response to say we can clearly evidence that the temperatures and all the other data that goes with it, and I think that's the important bit. And then of course, as Sandy alluded to as well, if you've got a clear inventory at the start of the tenancy that shows there wasn't an issue, and you've got regular routine inspections, it's about having the visual evidence monitoring, the data that supports it, and then I suppose in that situation you are less subjective about assumptions because you've got the data to prove it. And I think that's where it becomes defensible, which is really important with where we're going with the housing health and safety rating system and the new version as well, and trying to simplify it. So it's about bringing all those things together, isn't it?
Yeah.
We actually had a live action one of this a couple of weeks ago, where so we measure kind of in trends like you do in Strava, things like that, and this property was trending that it was not being ventilated at all, like 23 hours, 24 hours, no ventilation, red. And then there was the day that the remedial team had come in to do some work, and all of a sudden the property was ventilated, and you could literally, the property management agent was on the phone to the builder to say, what day was it that you went in? And they literally pinpointed that date, so you could see that when the builders were there and the windows were open and everything was fine, the property was fine. So you have then got that evidence to say, well, we know that the builder was here on this day, the property was ventilated.
Well, just one small thing to add to that question. Mid Wales, damp environment. Yeah, I think that we touched on it before. What we're here to do with the monitoring is to give you the answer, what is causing it, and then be able to have that conversation. Yes, sometimes it will be about opening windows, sometimes about closing windows and putting a dehumidifier in. So we can help with that as well. Sorry, Mitch.
Mitch, I was just gonna say it's probably worth at this point, because I am conscious of time, that anybody that submitted a question, what we will do, we do this whenever we've got a webinar. This has been a really well attended webinar, but we'll make sure that we route the question to whoever's best to answer it, whether that's TDS, DampSmart, or Klerky, and yeah, we'll essentially come back to each and every question over the next week, along with the extra resources that we're going to send out. I know Leonard and Tamsin, you've got your ideas around the clinics that you're looking to run as well, so we'll share some information around about that as well. I think that's probably the best thing to say, because I'm just conscious that otherwise we get into a question, we'll be running to 10 past, quarter past, and we want to keep it as close to this hour as we can, but equally we don't want to not respond to anybody that's kindly attended today. So
yeah, thanks for that, Richard. We've had quite a lot of questions, so I think nearly 25 questions, so we'll share those questions about to who's best to answer those, and we'll get back to everyone in the next few days along with those resources. So thanks to everyone who's registered for today's webinar. It's been really well attended, and something that we're proud of. So thanks to Leonard and Tamsin at DampSmart, thanks to Richard Klerky and Hive, and thank you, Sandy, at the TDS, for your input today. And yeah, have a great rest of the day, enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll also send a follow-up recording in a couple hours or so to everyone that's attended. I can see everyone leaving clapping emojis on the
Yeah.
chat for me, so which is really good. So I can't take the credit; it's everyone else. So, but yeah. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
And thank you, Mitch.
Yeah,
Goodbye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Nick. Thanks for organizing.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.